What's up, Ragin Nation? How y'all doing? This is Alex. You're watching the Ragin Ronin review. In this video, let's talk about HFR 3D. What that means is high frame rate 3D. If you don't already know, The Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey was shot at 48 frames per second. That was the optimal presentation for the film, to be presented in 48 frames per second and in 3D. This is something that Peter Jackson specifically wanted for this film. Now, there was a lot of anticipation about this. First of all, I gotta say that the HFR 3D presentation of the film brought in some very mixed reactions. A lot of people were excited about it, but not everybody thought it was perfect, and it isn't. It is not perfect at all in any way. They still have a long way to go in terms of perfecting 3D. What a lot of people had to say about it in terms of the negative things was that it was a little bit too clear, and it gives you the soap opera effect, and it makes it look cheap. Things are just too clear to the point that it looks too real. Now, I can't see that as a bad thing, but things being too real means that if there are some very strong camera movements, then it might make you a little bit dizzy. And that's what happened to some people who watched the film. They're so used to the 24 frames per second presentation, which is essentially the film look, and that when the camera just moves and pans everywhere, it looks too real to the point where it just makes them a little bit nauseous. And that was the first negative thing about the 48 frames per second presentation. The other thing is that, like I said before, it gives it the soap opera effect. With more frames, the picture looks more smooth and more clear, thus making it look cheap. Now, I want to give you a little bit of background information about the whole frames per second talk. 24 frames per second, or specifically 23.97 frames per second, is the lowest frame rate that the human eye can see without having the film or video look choppy. Anything less than 23.97 frames per second, we will start noticing that the picture starts stuttering, or in other words, become choppy. And that won't look good at all. The picture will start strobing. From the very beginning of film, 70 plus years ago, they have always shot and presented their films at 24 frames per second. And that is why we're so used to watching movies at 24 frames per second. Our brains are just completely used to it, and by memory or our visual taste for things, we feel that 24 frames per second is the standard. As soon as you start increasing the frame rate, the video or film starts looking more and more smoother. You can go from 30 frames per second, which is broadcast quality, to 48 frames per second, which is the soap opera effect, and then 60 frames per second, which is the whole movie cheap camcorder look. And when you're watching a movie and when you're watching a home movie, you know exactly what I'm talking about. This video that you're watching right now is filmed at 60 frames per second. So imagine watching The Hobbit like this. It doesn't look good. It feels cheap, doesn't it? Having more frames per second makes things a lot smoother because there's more information that the human eye can take in one single second. But the downfall is that because we're so used to the 24 frames per second look, we just feel that anything that is above 24 frames per second just feels not right. Now, the reason why Peter Jackson decided to double the frame rate is because of the 3D presentation of the film. And with 3D shot at 24 frames per second, if there's some camera movements, there's going to be motion blur. And motion blur in 3D is kind of difficult for the human eye to really take in. It makes our eyes work harder. It makes the eyes feel more strained. And that is why for video and 3D fanatics, 48 frames per second, in my opinion, actually looks beautiful for 3D. Everything looks so smooth. The motion blur is eliminated by a huge amount, but it's still not completely eliminated. 3D is a format that I actually believe in. I think it is the future of entertainment, and having this movie presented at 48 frames per second with the 3D actually helped it. This is just my opinion. A lot of people will beg to differ, but when you really look at the bigger picture, there is no motion blur. The picture is more clear. Typically, when watching 3D movies, our eyes have to work hard. Our eyes don't have to work harder at a doubled frame rate. There are a lot of scenes where Peter Jackson brings the camera and the virtual cinematography through all these little small spaces, and they're just really long takes, wide shots in fact, of bringing the audience through these beautifully crafted environments. And the double frame rate in 3D made it look very beautiful. And most importantly, it looked very clear. A lot of people did not like the fact that it was too smooth or too clear, but when the camera is still, you see everything from the foreground to the background being clear. You can see things in the background that look more clear than it would have been had it been shot at 24 frames per second. I never once felt dizzy like some other people, but there are some scenes where all our characters are running and it's a very wide shot and it feels like it's in fast motion. I don't know if any of you picked up on that, but it kind of gives us the illusion that the characters that are on the screen are running faster than they normally would be. That was the only thing that I thought was kind of distracting in the movie. But other than that, I felt it helped enhance the movie experience. Now keep in mind, this movie was a very visual experience. It was more entertaining than it was an epic story. Peter Jackson put more into the visuals, and a huge part of it was all because of the spectacular action, the beautiful CG work, and of course the 3D presentation at the doubled frame rate. Even though the action sequences were really ridiculous, just the whole cinematography of it all, I think they succeeded. They did a great job with it. James Cameron set the bar with movies that are shot in 3D with Avatar. Now at this point, I think that Peter Jackson one-upped James Cameron with his HFR 3D presentation of The Hobbit: An Unexpected Journey. That is truly the most beautiful 3D I've ever seen. And I felt that it wasn't gimmicky in any way. I felt that if they wanted really good 3D, this is exactly what they needed to do to really bring the audience into the movie. And they did that. And they did it really well. As for the soap opera effect, it took a little bit of time for my eyes to get used to it, but I eventually got used to it. It didn't bother me because at the end of the day, I'm still watching a movie with a story and dialogue. So if you're really paying attention to all those things, you're just focused on being entertained as opposed to how weird the picture looks. The bottom line is that I didn't have a problem with the 48 frames per second 3D presentation of the film. Some wide shots made it look like the characters were running at fast motion, but other than that, I didn't think it was distracting in any way. I felt that it helped enhance the movie experience as a whole. Anyways, that's all I have to say in this video. I just wanted to give you my opinion and thoughts. I personally liked it. A lot of people didn't. But let me tell you this. If a long time ago, when film was first invented, had it been shot at 48 frames per second and always been like that as the standard, and up to today, if they lowered the frame rate after we're so used to seeing 48 frames per second, we would feel that it would look ugly or really choppy. So because of that, I'm keeping an open mind about it. Does that mean that all movies are going to be shot at 48 frames per second? No, it doesn't. You don't have to worry. Movies are still going to retain their film look. This was an experiment for Peter Jackson. The guy is a visionary, and he felt that this is the vision he wanted for the audience. Now, because of the success of The Hobbit, James Cameron is considering shooting Avatar 2 and 3 at 60 frames per second. That is going to make the 3D even more easier to watch. I'm a little bit concerned about that because 60 frames per second makes it look like a home movie. And it's really going to lose the film look. And to top things off, a lot of people who didn't like 48 frames per second are going to think that Avatar 2 and 3 at 60 frames per second is going to look even more cheap. But anyways, I'm keeping an open mind. As a movie buff and aspiring filmmaker, I'm very fascinated by all these different types of technologies. But at the end of the day, film is still film. 24 frames per second is the standard, and that will always be the standard. And there you have it. What did you guys think of the high frame rate 3D presentation of The Hobbit? Let me know in the comment section below. As always, if you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, subscribe to my YouTube channel, like me on Facebook, The Ragin Nation, and also follow me on Twitter at Ragin Nation. My name is Alex Yu, and thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Peace. They're all unique in their own way, and it's quite apparent. But other than that, they don't really provide a whole lot to make you feel that much for whatever it is they represent.